Hello everyone, and welcome back to Code Your English, the channel that will help you to learn and grow fast in your life. My name is Jason. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Thank you for spending this time with me. Before we start, I want to ask you a few questions. You don't have to answer out loud. Just let them sit with you for a moment. Do you often say yes when you really want to say no? Do you worry about disappointing people, even people you barely know? Do you feel responsible for everyone's happiness, as if it's your job to make sure nobody around you is ever upset? And have you ever agreed to something, a favor, a plan, a request, and then, almost immediately afterward, felt a heavy wave of regret? If any of those questions made you pause, even a little, then this episode is for you. Today, we're going to talk about something that touches almost every one of us at some point in our lives: people pleasing. It's a topic that sounds small on the surface, but it reaches into everything: our friendships, our families, our jobs, our sense of who we are. And here's the strange thing about it: people pleasing often looks kind. It looks generous. It looks like the behavior of a good person. But underneath that pleasant surface, it can quietly, slowly damage our lives. So settle in. Let's talk about it honestly, gently, and without judgment. I'll say this now, at the very beginning, because I think it's worth hearing before anything else. Nothing you're about to hear today is meant to make you feel guilty. This isn't a lecture, and it isn't a list of accusations. Think of it more like a mirror, a chance to see a pattern clearly, maybe for the first time, so that you can decide for yourself what you want to do about it. Some people listening today will recognize themselves in almost everything we talk about. Others might recognize just a small piece. Both are completely fine. There is no correct amount of people-pleasing that you're supposed to have. We're simply here to look closely at something that affects so many of us and so rarely gets talked about openly. What does people-pleasing really mean? Let's start with a simple question. What actually is people-pleasing? First, I want to be clear about something important. Kindness is wonderful. Helping others, caring about the people around us, showing compassion, these are some of the best things about being human. We are not here to criticize kindness, but there's a difference between kindness and people-pleasing. And that difference matters more than most of us realize. Kindness comes from a place of choice. You help someone because you want to, because it feels good, because it aligns with who you are. People-pleasing, on the other hand, comes from a place of fear. It's not really about the other person at all. It's about protecting yourself from something uncomfortable. People-pleasing is often driven by fear of rejection, the worry that if you don't comply, someone won't like you anymore, fear of conflict, the desire to avoid any tension, any disagreement, any raised voice, fear of being disliked, the deep, sometimes unconscious belief that your worth depends on other people's approval, fear of losing relationships, the idea that if you ever say no, the connection might disappear. Let's look at what this actually looks like in daily life. Maybe you've done some of these things without even noticing. Agreeing with opinions you don't actually believe, just to keep the peace. Working extra hours you didn't want to work, because you didn't know how to refuse. Lending money to someone, even when you needed that money yourself. Apologizing constantly for things that aren't your fault, for taking up space, for simply existing. hiding your true feelings because you're afraid of how someone might react. If you recognized yourself in even one of those examples, I want you to know something right now. You are not alone, and there is nothing wrong with you. Many people carry this pattern quietly, without ever having a name for it. And once we can name something, we can finally begin to understand it. There's a subtle test you can use if you want a quick way to tell kindness apart from people-pleasing in your own life. Ask yourself, if I said no to this, would I still feel like a good person? For kindness, the answer is almost always yes. You'd simply be a good person who happened to say no this time. For people-pleasing, the question itself can trigger a wave of anxiety, because somewhere inside, saying no feels tangled up with being a bad person, a selfish person, an unlovable person. That tangle, kindness fused with fear, is really the core of what we're calling people-pleasing today. And once you can see the tangle, you can start, very gently, to loosen it. Why do we become people-pleasers? So how does this happen? Why do some of us grow up constantly trying to make everyone around us happy, sometimes at the cost of our own well-being? The truth is, no one is born a people-pleaser. This is not something written into your personality from birth. It is learned, and it's usually learned very early, often in childhood, often without anyone intending to teach it. Here are some of the common roots. Childhood experiences play a huge role. Many people-pleasers grew up in homes where love or approval felt conditional, where they were praised only when they behaved a certain way, achieved something, or avoided upsetting anyone. Wanting approval from parents is deeply human. If a child learns that being agreeable, quiet, or accommodating brings warmth and attention, while having needs or opinions brings tension, that child will naturally lean toward the behavior that feels safer. Growing up around conflict can also shape this pattern. If a household was full of arguments, unpredictability, or emotional volatility, a child might learn to become the peacemaker, smoothing things over, keeping everyone calm, disappearing into the background so as not to add more stress. Fear of making mistakes, low self-worth, and a deep wish to be liked by everyone can all combine to create this pattern over time. Cultural expectations matter too. In many cultures, especially those that emphasize group harmony, humility, or respect for authority, people are taught from a young age to prioritize others' comfort over their own voice. And of course, past rejection and fear of abandonment can leave lasting marks. If someone experienced real loss, a friendship that ended, a parent who left, a community that excluded them, the nervous system can learn, I must never let this happen again. I must keep everyone happy so no one leaves. I want to pause here and say something important. Understanding these roots is not about blaming your parents, your culture, or your past. It's not about looking for someone to point fingers at. It's about self-understanding instead of self-blame. When we understand where a pattern came from, we stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What happened to me? And what do I need now?" That shift alone can be incredibly healing. Think of a young child who learns very early that calm and agreement bring warmth, while disagreement brings tension or distance. That child isn't making a conscious decision to become a people-pleaser. There is no moment where a 5-year-old sits down and thinks, "I will now spend the rest of my life prioritizing everyone else's comfort over my own." Instead, it happens the way most deep patterns happen. slowly, quietly, through thousands of small repeated moments, until the behavior becomes so automatic it doesn't even feel like a choice anymore. It just feels like who I am. That's actually good news, in a strange way. If it was learned piece by piece over years, it can also be unlearned piece by piece over time. You are not fighting against your fixed personality. You are gently retraining a habit that was built for a situation you are not necessarily in anymore. The hidden cost nobody talks about. Here's something that doesn't get discussed enough. People-pleasing is not a harmless habit. It is not simply being too nice. Over time, it quietly steals things from you. Important things. It steals your energy. Constantly managing other people's emotions, anticipating their needs, adjusting yourself to fit their expectations. This is exhausting work. Even if it's invisible work, it steals your time. Every hour spent doing something you didn't want to do just to avoid disappointing someone is an hour taken from your own life. It steals your confidence. When you consistently override your own opinions and needs, you start to lose touch with what you actually think and feel. Your inner voice gets quieter and quieter. It steals your mental peace. Living in a state of constant vigilance, always scanning the room, always trying to predict how others will react, is not peaceful. It's a kind of low-grade, ongoing stress that never really switches off. It steals your identity. If you spend years shaping yourself around what others want, you may eventually look inward and struggle to answer a simple question. Who am I really underneath all this accommodating? And it steals your freedom and your happiness, because a life built around avoiding disapproval is not a free life. It is a life lived in reaction to others, rather than in connection with yourself. Along the way, many people-pleasers describe feeling exhausted, as if they are always giving and never refilling. Invisible, as if no one actually sees the real them. Used, as if people only value what they can get from them. Emotionally empty, as if there's nothing left over at the end of the day. Resentful, even toward people they genuinely love. Disconnected from themselves, as if they are watching their own life from a distance. Here is an idea I want you to sit with, because I think it's one of the most important ideas in this entire episode. Every time you ignore your own needs, you teach yourself that your needs are less important. Read that again if you need to. It's not dramatic. It's simply true. Each small moment of self-abandonment adds up, and over months and years, it can shape how you see your own worth. Think about it almost like a bank account. Except instead of money, you're depositing and withdrawing something more precious, your sense of self. Every time you honor a need, you make a small deposit. Every time you override one to keep someone else comfortable, you make a small withdrawal. Most people-pleasers have been making withdrawals for years without ever making a matching deposit. Is it any surprise, then, that so many of them eventually feel emotionally bankrupt, burned out, hollow, unsure of what they even enjoy anymore, separate from what makes other people happy? This isn't weakness. It's simple math, repeated for years. And the good news is that the account can be rebuilt, one small, honest choice at a time. The emotional prison of always saying yes. Let's talk about what happens on the inside when you constantly say yes. Saying yes when you actually mean no tends to create anxiety, because part of you knows you're not being honest. Stress, because you now have to follow through on something you didn't want to do. Burnout, because your calendar and your energy are constantly being spent on other people's priorities. Constant pressure, because you're always trying to keep up with everyone's expectations. Overthinking, because you replay conversations, wondering if you said the right thing or if people are upset with you. And underneath all of it, a persistent fear of disappointing people. Let's imagine the internal dialogue that so many people-pleasers experience. Someone asks for a favor, and inside, a voice says, "I don't want to do this." But almost immediately, another voice interrupts, "But I can't say no." And so the pattern repeats. Say yes. Feel stressed. Become resentful. Say yes again. Feel more stressed. Become more resentful. This cycle can go on for years without ever being interrupted, unless we consciously choose to interrupt it. As you listen to this, I want you to think about your own life. Can you recognize this cycle anywhere? Maybe with a family member, a coworker, a friend. Just noticing it, without judging yourself, is already the beginning of change. What makes this cycle so exhausting is that it operates almost entirely under the surface. From the outside, everything looks fine. You showed up. You said yes. You did the favor. Attended the event. Took on the extra project. Nobody around you can see the quiet toll it's taking. Because the toll is invisible. It's internal. It's the tightness in your chest before you answer a message. It's the sigh you let out after you hang up the phone. It's the way you lie awake at night rehearsing conversations you wish had gone differently. Over time, this invisible weight becomes so familiar that many people-pleasers stop even noticing it as unusual. It simply becomes the background hum of daily life, until, eventually, something breaks the pattern. Whether that's exhaustion, illness, a difficult conversation, or simply a moment of clarity, like the one you might be having right now. Why people respect boundaries, more than constant sacrifice. Now here's something that might surprise you, because it challenges a belief that many people-pleasers hold very deeply. Many people think, if I always help everyone, everyone will love me. It feels logical, doesn't it? Be endlessly available, endlessly agreeable, endlessly self-sacrificing, and surely people will appreciate you for it. But here's the reality. People usually respect those who respect themselves. Think about the people in your own life whom you admire most. Are they the ones who agree with everything, who never push back, who seem to have no opinions of their own? Or are they the ones who are warm and kind, but who also have a clear sense of their own values? People who can say, "I'd rather not," without apologizing endlessly, and who somehow still feel easy to be around? Healthy boundaries build trust. Mutual respect grows when both people in a relationship feel like their needs matter. Not just one person constantly giving and the other constantly receiving. And honest communication, even when it's a little uncomfortable in the moment, creates far deeper connection than constant, silent compliance ever could. Being kind does not require saying yes to everything. In fact, real kindness often requires the opposite, the willingness to be honest, even when honesty is harder than simply agreeing. There's an interesting irony here worth pointing out. People-pleasers often fear that boundaries will make them less likable. But in practice, the opposite tends to be true. Think about someone who agrees to everything, who never has a preference, who seems to bend in whatever direction the conversation pushes them. Over time, This can actually become difficult to be around, not because the person is unkind, but because there's nothing solid to connect with. You never quite know what they really think. You can't be sure their agreement is genuine. There's a certain safety and ease that comes from being around someone who is honest about their limits, because you always know where you stand with them. Boundaries, in this sense, aren't walls that push people away. They're more like clear signposts that help relationships function with less confusion and far less hidden tension. The difference between being kind and being a people-pleaser. Let's make this distinction very clear, because it's at the heart of everything we're talking about today. Kind people help because they choose to. Their help comes from generosity, not obligation. They can say no when they need to, without spiraling into guilt. After they help someone, they usually feel peaceful, not drained, not resentful. They respect themselves, and in doing so, they're also able to genuinely respect others. People-pleasers, on the other hand, tend to help out of guilt rather than genuine desire. They feel pressured, as though refusing isn't really an option. Afterward, they often feel exhausted rather than fulfilled. They may unconsciously expect approval or gratitude in return for their sacrifice, and if it doesn't come, they feel hurt or unseen, and in the process, they often ignore their own needs entirely. Here's a simple, relatable example. Imagine a friend asks for help moving apartments this weekend. A kind person might think it over and say, "I actually have plans, but I could come by for an hour in the morning." They set a limit that works for them, and they mean it. A people-pleaser might feel a knot in their stomach, say yes immediately, despite already being exhausted, cancel their own plans, and spend the entire day quietly resentful, wondering why they always end up in these situations. Same request, completely different internal experience. The difference isn't in the act of helping, it's in whether the helping comes from choice or from fear. Here's another everyday example. Imagine a coworker asks you to cover part of their workload while they're out sick. A kind response might sound like, "Sure, I can take on the report, but I won't be able to handle the client call. Can someone else cover that part?" It's generous, but it's also honest about capacity. A people-pleasing response might sound like, "Of course, don't worry about anything. I've got it all covered." Even while your own deadlines quietly pile up in the background, and a small resentment starts to grow that you may not even fully admit to yourself. Notice that in both cases, the coworker gets help. The difference is what happens afterward, inside you. How people-pleasing hurts relationships. Here's something that might feel surprising. People-pleasing, despite looking like it strengthens relationships, can actually quietly damage them. Think about it. People-pleasing creates dishonest communication. Not lying exactly, but a kind of constant, gentle bending of the truth to avoid friction. It creates hidden resentment, which tends to build up over time like sediment at the bottom of a river, until one day it overflows in an unexpected way. It creates confusion, because the people around you never really know where you actually stand. It creates emotional distance, ironically, even though the entire behavior is meant to bring people closer. And ultimately, it can create a lack of trust, because trust is built on authenticity, not on someone constantly performing agreeableness. Here's the core truth. People cannot know the real you if you always hide your feelings. Real relationships, the kind that sustain us, that feel nourishing, that last, need honesty. They need two real people showing up, not one real person and one carefully managed performance. It might feel safer in the short term to hide your true feelings, but in the long term, it prevents the very closeness you're hoping to create. There's a quiet loneliness that many people-pleasers describe, even in relationships that look full and busy from the outside. Lots of friends, lots of plans, lots of people who seem to care. And yet, underneath it, there can be a persistent feeling of not truly being known. That loneliness makes sense once you understand the mechanism. If you spend years showing people a smoothed-over, agreeable version of yourself, then even the love and appreciation you receive is, in a sense, directed at a version of you that isn't entirely real. Of course, that leaves something feeling unsatisfied. The good news is that this can shift. Even a small act of honesty, sharing a genuine opinion, admitting you're struggling, saying what you actually want for dinner instead of whatever you want is fine, begins to build a bridge toward being truly seen. Why saying no feels so difficult? If all of this makes sense intellectually, you might be wondering, then why does saying no still feel so hard? There are real, understandable fears underneath that difficulty. Fear of looking selfish, as though prioritizing yourself even once makes you a bad person. Fear of hurting someone's feelings, especially someone you care about. Fear of conflict, because disagreement can feel dangerous, even when it isn't. Fear of rejection, the worry that saying no might cause someone to reject you first. Fear of losing friendships, as though every relationship is fragile enough to break over a single boundary. These fears are real, and I don't want to dismiss them. But here is something worth remembering. Discomfort is temporary. Resentment lasts much longer. The discomfort of saying no, that brief, awkward moment, that small spike of anxiety, usually passes within minutes or hours. But the resentment of saying yes when you didn't want to can last for days, weeks, sometimes years, quietly poisoning how you feel about a relationship or even about yourself. Here's a reassuring example. Imagine you're invited to an event you truly don't have the energy for. You might say, "Thank you so much for inviting me, but I'm going to sit this one out." That sentence might feel uncomfortable to say, but notice, it doesn't attack anyone, it doesn't require a long explanation, and most reasonable people will simply accept it and move on. The discomfort is real, but it's small, and it passes. It also helps to remember that you are allowed to say no without providing a detailed justification. Many people-pleasers feel they need an airtight excuse before they're permitted to decline anything, as if only a medical emergency or an unbreakable prior commitment counts as a valid reason. But "I'm not up for it this time" is a complete sentence. "I need to rest" is a complete sentence. You don't owe anyone a defense of your own limits, the same way you wouldn't expect someone else to defend theirs to you. How to stop being a people-pleaser. Practical guide. Now let's get practical. Understanding the problem is important, but I also want to give you real, usable steps you can start practicing today. Step 1. Notice your automatic yes. Before you can change a pattern, you have to see it clearly. Start paying attention to the moments when yes comes out of your mouth, before you've even had time to think. The goal here isn't to judge yourself, it's simply to notice. Try to build in a small pause before answering any request, even just a few seconds. "Let me check and get back to you" is a wonderful low-pressure phrase that buys you time to think. Step 2. Ask yourself, what do I actually want? This sounds simple, but for many people pleasers, it's a genuinely difficult question because they've spent so long focused on what others want. Practice checking in with yourself, even briefly, before responding to requests. Step 3. Practice small no's. You don't need to start with the biggest, scariest boundary in your life. Start small. Decline an invitation you're not excited about. Say you're unavailable for a call at a certain time. Ask for more time before giving an answer, instead of agreeing on the spot. Each small no builds the muscle for bigger ones later. Step 4. Accept that not everyone will be happy. This is one of the hardest truths to accept, and also one of the most freeing. You cannot control other people's reactions. Someone might be a little disappointed when you say no, and that's okay. It's a completely normal part of having relationships with real, independent people. Their disappointment is not evidence that you did something wrong. Step 5. Stop apologizing unnecessarily. Notice how often you say sorry for things that don't actually require an apology. Sorry for asking a question. Sorry for having a different opinion. Sorry for existing in a shared space. Try replacing sorry for the late reply with thanks for your patience. Try replacing sorry, can I ask something? With simply asking the question. Small language shifts like this can quietly reshape how you see yourself. Step 6. Build healthy boundaries. A boundary is simply a clear statement of what is okay and what isn't okay for you. It doesn't need to be harsh or dramatic. Boundaries can sound like, I'm not able to take on extra work this week, or I need some time alone this evening, or I'd rather not discuss that right now. Boundaries protect your energy the same way a fence protects a garden, not by keeping everyone out, but by giving what's growing inside room to thrive. Step 7. Remember, your value does not depend on pleasing everyone. This might be the most important step of all, so let's slow down here. Your worth as a person is not a score that goes up when people approve of you and down when they don't. You were valuable before you ever learned to please anyone, and you remain valuable even in the moments when someone is disappointed in you. This truth doesn't need to be earned through constant accommodation. It's simply, quietly true. A helpful way to hold on to this idea day to day is to picture your worth as something fixed, like your height rather than something fluctuating, like your mood. Nobody's approval makes you taller. Nobody's disappointment makes you shorter. Their reactions are simply information about them, about their preferences, their moods, their own histories, not verdicts on your value as a person. Once this idea starts to feel true in your body, and not just true in your mind, saying no becomes a little less frightening every time. Replacing people-pleasing with self-respect. As you begin to shift out of old patterns, something beautiful can start to happen. The questions you ask yourself begin to change. Instead of constantly asking, what do they want? You can begin asking, what is right for me? This shift opens the door to healthy confidence, a steadier sense of self-worth, and real emotional maturity. It allows honesty to become a natural part of how you move through the world, rather than something you have to force. And it allows for a more balanced kind of kindness, one that includes you in the circle of people worth caring for. Here is the heart of it. You can care for others without abandoning yourself. This is not a contradiction. In fact, the people who can care for others most sustainably are often the ones who have learned to care for themselves first. Kindness that comes from a full cup is very different from kindness that comes from an empty one. A simple, real-life story. Let me tell you a short story. It's not about anyone specific. It's a composite, the kind of story so many people quietly recognize in themselves. Imagine someone, let's just call this person our friend, who spent most of their adult life saying yes. Yes to extra shifts at work. Yes to family requests, even inconvenient ones. Yes to friends who only seemed to call when they needed something. Our friend was known as the reliable one, the easy one, the one who never caused problems. But underneath that reputation, our friend was exhausted, tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix, quietly resentful, though they would never have said that word out loud, disconnected from their own likes, dislikes, and dreams, because there had never been enough space to explore them. Then, slowly, our friend began setting small boundaries. It started tiny, declining one extra shift, saying no to one family favor, telling one friend, "I actually can't talk right now." It wasn't easy. In fact, our friend lost a few relationships along the way. Relationships, it turned out, that had only ever worked because our friend never pushed back. Losing them hurt. But something else happened too. Our friend began building healthier friendships. Relationships with people who respected the new boundaries, who valued honesty over convenience. Over time, our friend became happier, more confident, more themselves. The lesson here isn't that boundaries are painless. They're not always. But they lead somewhere worth going, toward relationships built on truth instead of fear, and toward a version of yourself that finally gets to exist out loud. Reflection. Questions for you. I'd like to leave you with a few questions. You can think about these now, or come back to them later. There's no rush, and there's no wrong answer. When was the last time you said yes, but wanted to say no? What are you afraid will happen if you set boundaries? Do the people in your life know the real you? Are you living to be accepted? Or are you living to be authentic? And finally, what's one small boundary you could practice this week? Take a moment with each of these. Let them settle. You don't need to have perfect answers right now. Just noticing is enough for today. As we come toward the end of this episode, I want to leave you with something to carry with you. People may not always like your boundaries. That is okay. It doesn't mean you did something wrong. It simply means you are becoming a full, honest person instead of a reflection of everyone else's expectations. The people who truly care about you will respect them. And if someone can't respect a reasonable boundary, that tells you something important about the relationship, not about your worth. Kindness should include yourself. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to choose yourself without feeling guilty about it. Here is the central message I hope you take with you today. Every time you choose honesty over approval and self-respect over constant sacrifice, you become a little freer. Real kindness does not ask you to disappear. It allows both you and others to be valued. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Conversations like this one mean a lot to me, and I hope it meant something to you too. If you're listening to this as part of your English practice, congratulations. You just spent this time both improving your English and exploring one of the more important topics in your emotional life. That's not a small thing. Be proud of yourself for showing up for both. This week, I'd like to invite you to notice just one moment, just one, where you have the chance to choose honesty instead of automatic agreement. You don't have to change everything overnight. Just notice one moment. That's enough to begin. Keep listening, keep learning, keep growing, both in English and in life. Until next time, take care of yourself the way you take care of everyone else. You deserve that. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you in the next episode.